Hi, thank you for joining me. My name is Mindy Mandell, and this is a series of videos on Proclus's Elements of Theology. I'll put a link here for the playlist. But today, in this video, I'm going to talk about propositions 113 through 115. And throughout this series, I have been using the E.R. Dodds translation. In the description box, you can find a link for a PDF version. Okay, well now we've gotten quite far into the book and we've reached a turning point in this text. It's now time to ask ourselves, what has Proclus done up to now? Well, for one thing, he has given us a vocabulary, and this vocabulary points to a reality behind the words. This reality-infused vocabulary makes up the building blocks for the logos. So these first 112 propositions give us a framework. It's a framework that Proclus will bring to life by infusing with the gods. He has introduced the gods briefly in conjunction with the Henads. I did talk about that a bit in my previous video. But going forward, Proclus will present the gods as the providential agents that carry goodness throughout all the realms of reality. Up to now, we have seen all the parts move as they do out of a certain necessity. Something like this must be true, remaining, proceeding, reverting. We see likeness being key to these mechanics. Even the good has a certain logical necessity to it. Once the framework is in place, Proclus shows that it is all a one by limit and is infinite in power by infinity. Now he is ready to bring it to life with the gods. And then these propositions will be followed by the intelligences, which are the vehicles that carry the gods. And finally, Proclus ends with souls, which are the vehicles that carry intellects into our physical world. So with that introduction, let us meet the gods. Proclus's look at the gods begins with proposition 113, and this one reads, "The whole number of the gods has the character of unity." The whole number. So Proclus is talking about the gods collectively, as a whole. He is going to present them as a series and put the one at the head of this series. So he will be referring to Proposition 21. Proposition 21 reads, "Every order has its beginning in a monad and proceeds to a manifold coordinate therewith, and the manifold in any order may be carried back to a single monad." So there is a certain relationship between a monad and its manifold or series. And there's a corollary here, which in particular is what Proclus wanted to cite here. And he says that from this relationship it is apparent that for the one which is prior to all things, there is the manifold of the Henads, which Dodds translates as divine units. It's often translated as onenesses. And for the Henads, there's the upward tension linking them with the one. And thus there are Henads consequent upon the primal one. And then Proclus will further add to this by referring to Proposition 97. This is the one that reads, "The originative cause of each series communicates its distinctive property to the entire series. And what the cause is primitively, the series is by remission." And remember that remission refers to the declining power of members as the series unfolds. So with these relationships in mind of cause to their series, let's return to Proposition 113. Okay, and so again, the proposition is that the whole number of the gods has the character of unity. So now let's take a look at the explanation. Okay, we can take this in pieces. So the first if is if the divine series has for antecedent cause the one, just as the intellective series has intelligence and the psychical series soul. So we're saying that for the series of intelligences, there is the divine intelligence or intellect as its monad, and the psychical series has soul as its monad. And now he's telling us that there is a divine series that has the one as its monad. And the second if he gives us is, he says, if at every level the manifold is analogous to its cause. And this is proposition 97. The series is by remission what the cause is primitively. So the manifold is analogous to its cause. And if we accept these two ifs, then this is what follows. It is plain that the divine series has the character of unity if the one is God. That's a big if he tagged onto the end of that sentence. So why did he add that? He actually had to, because in the first line he called the series headed by the one the divine series. So if the series is divine, then the one is God. But now that he has made the claim that the one is God, he has to back that up. He refers to Proposition 13 to do this. And it would probably be a good idea for us to review Proposition 12 as well. Proposition 12 told us that all that exists has the good as its principium and first cause. And in the course of the explanation of Proposition 12, he tells us that all things which exist have desire towards the good, and therefore how can there be a further cause beyond it? For if they desire that other cause, then how can their desire be preeminently towards the good? And if they don't desire that other cause, then why is it that they have no desire towards the universal cause whence they proceeded? And so he ties that first cause to the good. And then that brings us to Proposition 13, where he's going to tie the good to the one. Every good tends to unify what participates it, and all unification is a good. And the good is identical with the one. Again, adding here that all things desire it. So notice here that there's no mention specifically of God. That word God is not here. So we have to see how Proclus makes the connection. So back at Proposition 113, here is the next sentence. Now that the one is God follows from its identity with the good, Proposition 13. For the good is identical with God, God being that which is beyond all things, and to which all things aspire, and the good being the whence and the whither of all things. Well, it may feel like a stretch to you if you have the image of God as an old guy with a beard, and you might be tempted to reject this if you have an adverse feeling toward religion. But arguably, in general terms, this is what we mean by the term God, if you were to strip it of all personification. It is beyond all things, and all aspire to it. Well, he then goes on to say, thus, if a plurality of gods exist, they must have the character of unity. If the one is the monad of a series, and the one is God, then God must be the head of a series of gods. And since God is the one, the series of ones must have the character of unity. And he ends by saying that it is evident that such a plurality in fact exists. inasmuch as every originative cause introduces its proper manifold, which resembles it and is akin to it. And he's referring back, you can see here, to propositions 21 and 97, which were the two that we looked at the beginning. Going on to proposition 114, this one reads, every God is a self-complete henad or unit, and every self-complete henad is a God. So proposition 113 established the series of gods with the monad God at its head, and it tied that series to unity and the one. Now Proclus is rounding out the logic by tying together the term henad, which literally means unit or oneness, with the gods. So to show this, Proclus is first going to reference proposition 64. I want to take a look at that now. We've seen this one a few times already. This is the one that explains that every original monad gives rise to two series. So there is a series of substances that are complete in themselves, which we call self-constituted, and then there are what Proclus calls irradiations. They have their substantiality in something other than themselves. They are incomplete. And for proposition 114, he specifically cited the corollary. So let me scroll down to that. And I'm going to focus on this highlighted section here. From this, it is apparent that of the henads, some proceed self-complete from the one, while others are irradiated states of unity. So we have these self-complete henads and what he calls irradiated states of unity. So let's see how Proclus uses this. Okay, I want to start with this first paragraph here, and to make sure we can all follow the structure, I highlighted a few words that are key to that structure. So he starts off saying that if there are two orders of henads, as has been shown above, one consisting of self-complete principles and the other of irradiations from them, and if the divine series is akin to the one or the good, and of like nature with it, which would be proposition 113, the one we just looked at, then the conclusion is that the gods are self-complete henads. So do you see what he did here? First, we have the two series extending from the one, the self-complete and the irradiations. And then next, the divine series is akin to the one or the good. The conclusion then is that if the one is God and the head of a divine series, then the series must be made up of divine onenesses. And again, henad is a transliteration of a Greek word that means oneness, or Dodds is translating it as unit. Then in the second paragraph, he's going to point out that if we are to recognize the series of henads that are self-complete, then they must be gods. Now going on to the second paragraph, it starts off, and conversely, if a henad be self-complete, it is a god. For qua henad, I'm going to pause there. I don't like the word qua. It's just a Latin word that means as. I don't know why translators like to use qua, so I'm just going to replace it with as. I think it's easier to understand. For as a henad, it is most closely and especially akin to the one. And as self-complete, it's most closely and especially akin to the good, participating in both these respects the distinctive character of Godhead. So it is a god. Both these respects is referring to the idea that the henads are akin to both the one and the good, which are the two names for the Godhead. Okay, in the last sentence then, if on the other hand, it were a henad but not self-complete, or a self-complete principle but no longer a henad, it would be assigned to another order in virtue of its variation from the divine character. So those irradiations of unity are not gods, and self-complete terms in other series are also not gods. It is self-complete he-nads specifically that he is terming gods. And with that in mind, that will lead us into Proposition 115. And Proposition 115 is going to bring in other series. So now that he has clarified that the he-nads that he is focused on are gods, he will clarify that these gods are what we might call super essential, meaning that they are prior to being. So Proposition 115 reads, every god is above being, above life, and above intelligence. In other words, they are beyond, the gods are beyond even the intelligible realm. They are beyond all existence. Okay, looking to the explanation now, he opens with the gods being self-complete he-nads, and I think this has been well established. He then says that being, life, and intelligence are not he-nads, but unified groups. So what are these unified groups? We saw this term all the way back in Proposition 6. Here is actually where we were first introduced to the he-nads. Every manifold is composed either of unified groups or of he-nads. And we saw here that he-nads are the first unified group. And Proclus defined unified groups as having unity by participation. So the he-nads are the unities in the series of the one. But in other series, you have not he-nads, but unified groups. Okay, so coming back to Proposition 115, we see that if being, life, and intellect are unified groups, meaning they are intelligible and unified, but they fall short of the first unified group, then Proclus's conclusion, it is plain that every god transcends all the three principles in question. And he references here Proposition 5, so I'll jump back to that page. This proposition reads that every manifold is posterior to the one, and therefore a unified group would be posterior to a he-nad. And as further defense of his position that the he-nads outrank the unified intelligible, he writes, for if these three, though mutually distinct, are each implicit in the other two, then no one of them can be a pure unity, since each contains all. Okay, so what's that all about? It's time to revisit Proposition 103. Proposition 103 reads, all things are in all things, but in each according to its proper nature. For in being there is life and intelligence. In life, being and intelligence. In intelligence, being and life. But each of these exists upon one level intellectually, upon another vitally, and on the third existentially. This is that convoluted one that I diagrammed out in a previous video. This is the final diagram of Proposition 103, showing that all three of these intelligible terms are in one another. For our purposes now, we can see that if you have three terms that are unified together, they fall short of that which is a complete oneness. Going on to the second paragraph, Proclus writes, again, if the first principle transcends being, then since every god as God is of the order of that principle, it follows that all of them must transcend being. So now Proclus will show that the first principle is above being, but that the first principle transcends being is evident. For unity and being are not identical. It is one thing to say it exists, another to say it has unity. Now, if they are not identical, then either both must be attributes of the first principle, on which hypothesis it will be not merely one, but also something other than one. And we are left with a principle participating unity in place of unity itself. And we saw those arguments in the very first few propositions, and that is why he can quickly reject it. And the sentence ends with, or it has one of these attributes only. So now he has to address the possibility of having only one of these attributes, only unity or only being. Now, if it have being only, it will lack unity. But it is impossible to ascribe deficiency to the first principle, which is the good. Therefore, it has unity only, which implies that it transcends being. Okay, and now the last part. And if every principle bestows upon the whole of its order the distinctive character which belongs primitively to itself, then the whole number of the gods transcends being. Or again, every originative cause produces like terms before unlike. And that law of similitude is proposition 28. If then the primal Godhead transcends being, all the other gods will resemble it in this respect. Were they existences, they would owe their origin to the primal being, since this is the monad of all existences. So we got a few different arguments there. Proposition 97, just as a reminder, is the one that states that what the cause is primitively, the series is by remission. Proposition 28 is one that we've seen many times. Every producing cause brings into existence things like to itself before the unlike. So the law of similitude. We saw it actually both in the procession and in other propositions. We saw it in the reversion. And then at the end we have there again even another argument here. So the henads imitate the one in their transcendency over being. And he ends by saying that if they were existences, they would be in the series of being, not in the series of one. So that brings me to the end of another video. Please like and comment, and join me in the next video.